Okay, in this lecture, we're going to talk about resumes. And this is maybe the most important document in the job application process, simply because almost any job you apply for is going to require a resume. And it's the very first thing that an employer will see about you. So it's really, really important that you get it right. I'm going to be referencing a couple of different documents in this lecture. All of them are available on the course website, and you might want to pull these up so that you can follow alongside the lecture. So first of all, what is a resume? Essentially, this is a structured list of your skills and your qualities and your experiences, and it's meant to represent you and market who you are. And it has some very specific purposes. So it should showcase your transferable skills, your strengths, your relevant experience, and your knowledge. And it's used to market you. It sells your professional worth, kind of like how a company might sell a product. You can think of it as a marketing tool for your skills and your experience. Now, because this is the first document that employers or potential employers will see about you, the purpose is to get them wanting more. So you want to get through the door with this document. You want to be invited for an interview. You want them to read more of your materials, or you want to be shortlisted. So in order to get shortlisted, it's really important that you demonstrate how you're meeting the employer's needs. And then there's an added benefit of this particular document, which is that I think it can build career confidence. I think you'll find when you start making a list of all of your accomplishments, all of the things that you have done, you'll be really impressed with yourself. At least I hope you will be. And so this can be a really helpful process towards a career path, just sitting down and identifying all the things about you that might be important to tell a potential employer. So this is a document that'll represent you. It'll be unique to you. There's kind of a look and a feel that resumes should have, but then there's a little bit of flexibility for you to be creativity within certain standards. So I'm going to give you some tips and some tricks on how to do a resume. They're a pretty specific genre. They might feel a little bit weird and not very intuitive given what you're used to writing about. And so it's really important that you become familiar with and work within this genre because it's what your employers will expect. So this isn't really the time to push boundaries, though you can be a little bit creative within certain parameters. And because this document will be used in the first part of a job application process, it'll be scanned by your employer really quickly. Recruiters tend to scan all the resumes that they receive, which might be hundreds of them, and then decide who they want to look at a little bit more closely. So, question, on average, how long do you think an employer takes to read a resume? What do you think? The answer is actually less than a minute. And some research even shows that recruiters spend an average of 6 seconds, only 6 seconds, scanning resumes. So, what does this mean for how we think about the resume and how we might strategize? Well, it needs to be really easy to read. It needs to be very clear. It needs to be very concise so that somebody can just glance at it and get an essence of who you are and how you fit the position. So in terms of content, you want to be really selective. You want to think very carefully about which skills and knowledge you want to include. You want to tailor the information to the role. So in other words, you want to include things that very specifically address the job ad. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. You want to categorize your resume and communicate your values and strengths through action statements. In terms of writing, you need to be super concise and clear. Avoid unnecessary language and be direct. Choose your words very, very carefully because you have very few words to work with. Visually, there are some tips and tricks for how to format your resume to make it really, really easy to read. When you're writing an academic paper, you write in paragraphs, and you're thinking mostly about content. But when you write a resume, you want to think a little bit more visually. You want to break it up according to categories, you want to use subheadings, and you want to use bullet points. And you can think about using your margins and using bold and italic and like little creative ways to draw the employer's eye to different parts of your resume and to emphasize different things and make it easy to read. Resumes have different parts. They're divided into categories, and there are a couple of parts that will always be consistent. So your resume should always include a header, which has your name and your contact information. It should include your education, especially since you are a student. This should probably come first. Over time, maybe it'll migrate down the document. Your skills will normally be there as well. And then there are tons and tons of different categories that you can include, such as the following: employment. This could be divided into paid and unpaid experience, your certifications and training you might want to include, community experience, links to sample work, campus and community involvement, relevant courses that you've taken. I think it's always a good idea to include your education in creative ways on your resume. Sometimes students tend to think, oh, only my extracurriculars count, but no, your education's really, really important. Leadership experiences you've had, and the list goes on and on. Honors, awards, etc. You won't include all of these categories, so you'll choose which ones seem most relevant to you and which ones are most relevant to the job you're applying for. Now, the slide I'm showing you here is a sample resume, a resume template. It's provided by the Career Center, and they have lots and lots of examples that are in the career guide. You can look there for more examples of resumes. What you'll see by looking at this is that it's 1 page long, which is appropriate for a college student or a recent college graduate. It's organized really nicely. It's in clear categories. The most important stuff is first. So in this case, education and employment experience. You can rearrange these. You can rearrange these categories as necessary. Now, a really important part of your resume is the tailoring. In other words, how you make it relevant and how you organize it according to the job that you are applying for. What I recommend is that students keep a kind of master resume. So one long document that has everything that you've done, all of your accomplishments, anything you could potentially want to include. And what you can then do is kind of remove categories and add things and move them around as you apply for jobs, depending on what the job is looking for and which skills and qualities you want to emphasize. Okay, we're going to go through the process of tailoring a resume together so that you can understand what I mean. So I'm showing you here an example job ad. This is a job working for the Getty. It's a research associate. It's the type of job you might be qualified to apply for when you graduate from college, when you're a recent grad. And so the first part here, and you can pull up the full document from the course website if you'd like to follow along with me. So the first part kind of goes over some basic stuff, how many hours a week it is, what the salary is. And then as we go along, we'll see a job summary. You might want to pause the video here to read that. And then we'll see the major job responsibilities. So these describe what kinds of things you would be doing if you take on this role. And then here's where we get to the part that's really important for resume building: the qualifications and the knowledge and skills and ability. You should take a moment to read these carefully before we go on. So what I would do is start highlighting. Take a document like this, start highlighting things that you want to emphasize in your resume and brainstorming. And here is what that might look like. So in blue here, I've highlighted things that might be proven in your education section, demonstrated that you know through, for example, your relevant coursework. So a bachelor's degree is a requirement. That's going to be right there in your education. A working knowledge of cultural heritage. Maybe you took some coursework that gave you that kind of working knowledge, and so you could emphasize that in your resume. And then in yellow, I've highlighted things that could maybe be described in your skills section. So a working knowledge of a foreign language, if you have that could be under skills. Then what you want to do is start to think about experiences that you have had or things that you have accomplished that demonstrate what is required of the job. And I have emphasized that in red. So having strong communication skills, maybe that's something that you demonstrated in your role in a club or a society. Having research skills, maybe that's something that you demonstrated through a senior project or a senior thesis. Once you've done this brainstorming, then you can start to build the bullet points that go under each category of your resume. Now, building strong bullet points is a real art. What you want to do is think about 4 things that make up a good bullet point. So first of all, you want to talk about what you did. What were your duties? What were your responsibilities? And what were the projects maybe that you were involved in? Second, how did you do it? Were there specific tools or resources or technology that you used? And here's a good place where you can demonstrate transferable skills. Third, details. What exactly did you do? How often did you do it? What was the purpose? What was involved in this work? And then finally, and this is really important, a lot of students forget about it, what were the results? What did you accomplish? What kind of goal did you meet? So let's practice building a good bullet point. So here's one that would be really typical of what I see in a lot of student resumes. Collected data for a research project. So you're applying for this job at the Getty, you know that they want research abilities, and you have done a senior project that involved collecting data. Well, this could actually be a much, much stronger bullet point by looking at the what, how, details, and results. So here's an example of what it could look like if you strengthened it. So what did you do? You collected and you analyzed historic data, let's say from the LA Times, over a 50-year period. So that's your how and your details. And what was the result? The result is that you were able to show how attitudes towards women's sports have changed over time. So that's a research result that was created through your data collection and analysis. Let's look at another example having to do with communication, another requirement of this job. Maybe you are part of a club or a society and you were involved in communication by managing the social media pages for that society. We're going to say in this example that you're a member of the History Honors Society. And so the bullet point that I might expect to see a lot from students would be quite simple, posted on society's social media pages. How can we embellish this and make it a little bit better through the what, why details and what was the result? Created and promoted weekly marketing campaigns for History Society's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, which boosted audience participation at events by 20%. Now, here's something important. If you have numbers at all, like I improved participation by 20%, that's really great. And you might also not have that, and that's okay. So you could just say something here like improved audience participation and leave it at that, or made more students aware of our activities or our offerings as a society. So some more just tips for building good bullet points. There's no need to use the first person. So remember, we want to be super, super concise in our language. And that means we don't write, I, carried out research, or I researched and analyzed. You would just say researched and analyzed. You want to use the active voice instead of the passive voice. If you're not sure what active and passive voice means, go ahead and Google it. There are tons of examples out there. But essentially, you want to be nice and direct, and you want to be the person acting. You don't want to be acted upon. You want to be confident. So this is not a place to be kind of wishy-washy or to imply things. You want to state them clearly and state them confidently, but don't be arrogant. Think very, very carefully about the action verbs that you use. So again, because you have very few words to use, you want to pick your words very carefully. And here actually is an example of some action verbs that the Career Center has put together for us. There's a page in the Careers Guide that has this. So you can be super specific about exactly what you mean when you're talking about research or communication or a number of other categories. We want to make sure that your keywords relate to the job posting. So if possible, you can even use some of the same keywords and the same language that you see in a job ad, which will immediately tell the potential employer that you're a great fit. Things that are important not to include in your resume. Don't ever include photos of yourself. You don't need to put references available on request. If they want references, they'll ask them for you, and there will be a place where you can provide those. Don't ever provide personal details about yourself beyond your, name and your address. Don't include things like your marital status or your citizenship or your date of birth. And no other pictures either, even, beyond photographs of yourself. Some formatting tips, your margins need to be reasonable. So I recommend 1/2 inch to 1 inch margins on all slides. Spacing between each section and positioning is really important. The length, it should be 1 page long. For a recent college grad, your resume really should not be more than 1 page. Font needs to be big enough that it can be read, 10 to 12 point in a reasonable academic font is a good idea. Definitely don't go smaller than 10 points. And consistency is really important. So again, if we look at another example here of a resume, you can see that it's really easy to read because the formatting is consistent. It's got nice margins. It's divided into categories. There is spacing there so that everything's not kind of scrunched up and you can read through it really easily. You can see how this is a document that would be easy to scan if you were an employer. Okay, so that's the end of our resume lecture. I hope this has been helpful, and now we're gonna practice doing some resumes together.